Well, hello and welcome to the Real Momentum Podcast, where it's our vision and mission to reach and lead men for kingdom impact. I am your host, Mike Spivey. I have the privilege of being the senior pastor at Zion Baptist Church in Henderson, Kentucky. I'm joined by my two good friends at Real Momentum, Keith Boggs and Justin Green, and this is the Real Momentum Podcast. Well, man, we say it every week, but I mean it every single time I say it, that I am overly excited about today's show and having a conversation with you men. And I can't wait to listen to our guest this morning and hear all of his wisdom and insight on men's ministry especially. And I know you guys are excited as well.
That's right. We're so honored to have Dr. Patrick Morley today. I was a young pastor reading a book just before we even got on here, just talking about that book, The Man in the Mirror. And it really was impactful in my life in very practical ways. And everything I read through that book was so inspiring. And it gave me a vision, kind of live for in different parts of my life. And so we have Patrick Morley today. He founded the global ministry that impacts millions of men. And we see that, in the conversations I have, the books I recommend that he's written over the years. And he's a leading authority on men's issues, written over 23 books and more than 750 articles, all focusing on helping men win. And that's a big deal that we're about. And we're excited to have you join us today, Patrick.
Well, yes, we are.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Mike. And then Justin, you're muted, but thank you as well.
Good to have you, brothers. Good to meet you as well. Keith talks about you a lot, and we reference your material a lot in men's sermons and men's studies and quotes from you. So it's finally good to see your face and to meet you here. I'm excited to have you on.
Thank you. It's a thrill and an honor for me to be with you, men. Appreciate you having me, and I hope this is just like the most helpful information to everybody who's listening.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Well, we want to kind of jump in here, and there's several things you wrote in your book, and No Man Left Behind, that we'll get to throughout the conversation here. But I think it's important that men understand. How did Patrick Morley get to where he's at? How did he, his relationship with the Lord? Talk about salvation, and you called him men's ministry specifically, but maybe share a little bit of your background so we get a good idea of who we're talking to today, and let those listeners understand as well.
Well, the short version of this is that I grew up in a Christian home that didn't know Christ, if that makes any sense to you. I think my mom and dad wanted to do well, but it was unexampled to them on how to be, godly parents. And so I was left basically to guess at manhood, and I ended up quitting high school. I joined the Army, and I remember waking up in a ditch doing, one morning after having done what soldiers do, and thinking to myself, what happened to you, Morley? You were just a nobody, headed nowhere, and it was really true. So decided I wanted to turn my life around, and signed up for the GED, took that test, and then enrolled at NC State University, which had an extension campus at Fort Bragg, where I was stationed. So I did my freshman year there at NC State, and I remember reading for a literature exam one night, Shakespeare, Hamlet to be specific, and ran across this line: "This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man." And I remember thinking, that's it. That's the most noble thought that I've ever heard uttered. And so I'm going to adopt that, make that my credo, and try to do the right thing by every person I meet every day. And that's how I will find the secrets of meaning and purpose. Wow. And so that day I became a moralist. And still am. But I quickly realized that all moralists basically have one thing in common: none of them have any money. And so I decided to become a materialist as well. And I made my life philosophy that money will solve my problems and success will make me happy. And I threw myself into that. And the economy was good. So I thought it was me, but it was really just a good economy. But I did very, very well, met all my goals. And utterly frustrated, taking those frustrations out on Patsy, my wife. And one morning, I was ranting and raving, and she was just sitting there taking it like a man, but she did have these big tears rolling down her face. And after what seemed like a short eternity, she asked me this question. She said, Pat, is there anything about me that you like?
Mm.
Well, I felt like I'd been tasered. I remember wandering off to the office, staring out the window the rest of the morning and thinking to myself, you're right there back in that ditch. You're still just a nobody headed nowhere. And it was true. And so that is what eventually led me to. So I had this faint idea in the back of my mind that the church is the institution, probably the only institution I could think of in the whole world that's actually designed to help a young man find the secrets of his identity, meaning, and ultimate purpose in life. And so by intuition, I drugged my wife to church, the thing she'd been praying for, I found out later.
Wow.
And some young men in that church took me under their wing, started showing me the ropes, didn't judge me, didn't try to fix me. They just loved me and started dragging me to their different events and homes and things like this and lunches and so forth. And it just got, guys, it just got to a point where I said, I have no idea what's going on here, but whatever these men have, I have to have it.
Wow.
I was consumed to get what they had. And then they explained the gospel to me, and I surrendered my life to Jesus. I was still a materialist, so
Yeah.
it took me another, most of the really big ideas about Christianity, they take 10 or 20 years to sink in. So, I mean,
That's
so
true.
the idea of grace and
Yeah.
performance and things like this, I mean, I had that all mixed up for about another 14 years to be specific.
Wow.
So anyway, that's the story of how my faith story of how I began the journey.
Yeah, maybe speak a little bit to, your call to men's ministry. How did that really, where'd that come from? I mean, you got right with the Lord, so to speak. These men helped you. Was it something that happened pretty quickly, or is it over time?
Yeah, I would say it was immediate and over time. So the immediate passion was I could not believe the simplicity of the gospel. And I could not believe the peace that came flooding in when I finally surrendered my life. And I guess I'm a little excitable, but I just wanted everybody I knew to know about it. So I started taking all my friends to lunch and telling them what had happened. And they said, well, how can I do that? And so anyway, I started leading men to Jesus. And then I had all these guys coming to Jesus. And I said, oh gosh, what am I going to do now? And so
Wow.
I said, well, let's see if we can't get together at my office, one morning a week. And so I started a small group, and then that got to be too big, and one thing led to another. And so anyway, but all the while, I'm still trying to figure out the gospel myself while I'm telling other people about it. And so what happened was I ended up in the middle of a big business crisis of my own making. And about 3 years into it, it lasted 7 years. About 3 years into that, I was just recounting to God one morning. I was typing out a psalm, like a prayer every day. And I said, God, I just don't know how I can go on, one more day here. I'm just so weary. I'm just so tired. I said, God, you know how hard I've been working to be a godly husband, a dad who's in the picture, to deal with integrity in all my business affairs. I've been trying to be a good steward with the money you've entrusted to me. Lord, you know how many little old ladies I've helped across the street. I mean, God, you know all these things. Why won't you help me? Why won't you
Wow.
give me some relief? And just like we're talking, I heard this voice in my head, and the voice said, Pat, nothing you do will ever make you good enough for me to love you. I love you because I made you.
Amen.
And that was first
Good.
time I ever understood grace. It just
Wow.
kind of came, and it was 14, I was like 14-year mark in my journey. Grace came flooding in well, it was there, right? But the understanding came flooding in that I did not have to perform in order to make God happy or avoid his wrath. So you see, I knew that I was saved by grace, but I figured that it was up to me to prove that he hadn't made a mistake. And so I just poured myself into doing good works. And so then that was in the early part of 1987, and then in November, I had in this business crisis. This is the story of how I got called, and so understanding grace was, I mean, why would God call somebody who doesn't understand grace? So understanding that his love was unconditional for me, that was the first part. The second part was, in this business crisis, I'd built up a very large company. It was, it was one of Florida's 100 largest privately held companies, and I did that by 35. And so I was a big deal, and I had offices, I had 7 offices scattered around the country, and mostly in Florida. And one of my partners down in Fort Lauderdale, a Christian guy that I prayed with, and I had to let him go because there just wasn't any money. And so I get this letter from him one day, and it started out, "Dear Mr. Morley," and this was the guy I'd prayed with, and it kind of went downhill from there. And very, very angry and caustic and acerbic. And so I just felt this bitterness kind of take hold of my heart, and I'd never been a bitter person before. I, 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 I guess I just knew that what bitterness was by intuition, but I prayed, God, on top of everything else that's going on, please don't let me also become a bitter person. Wow. And so I fled the office, and I just started driving home, and I just heard the words in my mind, "Praise me." And so I'm not that guy, that sings, and I don't know how to do that. But I did have some music in the car, so I turned it up until the windows on the car were reverberating. And guys, boom, it was gone just like that, and it never came back. And so then I'm thanking God for that. And R.C. Sproul he was my principal professor. I actually, when R.C. Sproul came to Orlando, my real estate company did all his work, so we got acquainted, we became friends, and then I started taking classes at RTS. For those of you who don't know, that's Reformed Theological Seminary, those of you who are listening. And his big emphasis was the holiness of God. And so I'm driving down the road now, and this bitterness has gone away, and I don't know why, but I just thought about R.C.'s message about the holiness of God. That was kind of like his main message. And then I was struck by the irony that it's when men are down in the nadir of the valley, the lowest point that they can get, the message that they need at that point probably is not that God is holy. It's probably that God loves them. And so I drove a couple of minutes further down the road, and I heard this voice again in my head, and that voice said, "I want you to take my message of love to a broken generation." And I kind of lost it, pulled up to the traffic light, put on my sunglasses so nobody would see how emotional I was. And the voice came a second time and said, "I want you to take my message of love to a broken generation." And I'm still not quite sure how I got home after that, but I did write it down. I still have that. One of my 3 most treasured possessions is that little sheet of paper where I wrote down that calling.
Wow. And
I understood at that moment, I understood very clearly that that was my calling. And so and then strategy wise, where can we win helping broken people understand God's message, love? It seemed that the greatest need was still in this area of men, and it still is today. And so the Lord directed me to apply that calling in the area of reaching and discipling men.
That's awesome. Yeah, powerful. Well, I'm thankful for you, brother. I'm thankful that you were obedient to the call. I really am. I find you obviously been doing this a whole lot longer than I have, but I have made it myself a priority in every church I've been at to put some blood, sweat, and tears into men's ministry. That's why we do this. We believe when men wins, everyone wins around them. And I find the same thing you do. Maybe you can speak more to this on why, because I find more and more men are guessing at manhood. They just don't have a clue on manhood. And I even read this morning Psalm 44 when it talks about let the fathers tell of the things of old. And I had a godly father. I had a Christian home, but it actually really was a Christian home. And I still have my father with me, thankfully, that still instills manhood in me. Most guys don't have that, right? And you talked about performance and not a full understanding of the gospel of grace, which a lot of men find themselves in trying to perform, and they're not good husbands, they're not good fathers, and that so they guess at what that means. So why do you think so many men are guessing at manhood? What's the big thing that's missing there, and how can we not get them to guess at manhood, but actually instruct them in that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you've just opened up a can of worms, right?
That's my role here, I think.
So, so I'm a Bible teacher at heart, but now I'm going to depart from that, and I'm going to give you a couple of just personal opinions. They certainly won't be things you haven't heard before, and you may or may not agree with them. But I think when you look at the biggest shifts that have taken place since I started, and a caveat at the beginning of this, I want to say that the core affections of a man's heart have not changed ever.
Right.
And this is why whether you're 18 or 80, you can read the book of Ecclesiastes and the Sermon on the Mount, and it's going to speak to you.
Yeah.
Because the core affections of men's hearts are the same as they've always been. We still want the same things we've always wanted, but as the culture shifts, then how we go about pursuing those things either gets easier or more clouded, and we either get more focused or more distracted. So I think now to opinions, I think that just so to sum that little piece up, that caveat up, I think our similarities dwarf our differences. A man who's 18 and a man who's 56 have much more in common than a man who's 18 and a zebra. Okay.
Yeah.
So, that's the way it is. And by the way, younger men, they're not alien creatures. They're our sons, or in my case, our grandsons as well. And so, okay, now to the point. I think some of the biggest shifts that have taken place are from tribe to isolation. I would say that would be one of the biggest things. Men used to run in communities. Now, because of being on social media so much, a lot of men are isolated. Now, they have communities of types, right?
Right.
But they're not personal communities. Now, watch this. Every predator understands the strategic value of isolation. So anybody who's ever watched National Geographic knows that the lion doesn't go after the tribe or the herd. The lion goes after the stray, the one that's become isolated. And so men kind of have a double problem here, because when women have struggles with their lives, they tend to move toward relationships. But when men struggle and have problems, the natural tendency for most men, generalizations here, but they tend to move toward isolation.
I agree.
So now you have a man who's struggling and he's isolated. And so First Peter talks about how, that we have a lion roaming around looking for someone to devour. And so we become very vulnerable. So I think that's one of the big shifts that's taken place is from tribe to isolation, and then complementing that. And we could go on and on all day. Actually, we could make this a perpetual podcast until the first of us dies and we have to go to the funeral, right?
Right.
Yeah, but just maybe one or two, maybe two more. But so I think then, underneath this is probably analog to digital. So we have a lot of things that are happening because we've gone analog to digital. Um, so I'm Pat Morley, right? All right. Now who am I? Well, now I'm the smartest person in the world.
Hmm.
I literally am the smartest person in the world as long as I have this little device in my hands. And so
And the bravest as well. Say what you want.
say what you want. I can unfriend you, so much more easily than I used to be able to do it. So a lot of these changes, and all of this then culminates, I think, and just the final thing is just, I think we've, and this is nothing you guys don't talk about all the time, but this isolation and this, we fractured the family. We fractured the family.
Yeah.
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 And so back to your point, Mike, a lot of young men are guessing at manhood because it's unexampled to them and they're left to guess at how to be a man.
Yeah.
And we as the church haven't fully figured out yet. A lot of places are doing a good job, I must say, but a lot of churches have just simply not yet figured out how to help this generation. This generation, I'm not talking about young people. I'm talking about all men living at this time when I talk about this generation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I want to just kind of speak into that a little bit. You've all the years that you've led men in different opportunities, small groups, or I think you still do a Bible study there in Orlando with a group of men. What do you see happening? I know you've probably had a lot of conversations with pastors over the years, and where do you see that at? When you first started compared to where we are now, and then the other one, the follow up would be, what about these men that, these business leaders? I think most of what we're seeing is just these men that really catch it, and they're responding to their manhood, they're responding to their identity in Christ, and they take it to a whole level that probably the local church can't even take it because of they're easily to make decisions. They don't have to go to a committee or a budget and finance team to make decisions about starting a men's ministry. They really began to reach men, almost immediately. So kind of talk about your role with, dealing with pastors and where they were when you first began to where they are today, and then maybe follow up with the average man that's out there that's making a difference.
It's a conflicting report, okay? So go back to 1996, I started the National Coalition of Ministries to Men. And then in 1997, we had a big meeting at the Cove at the Billy Graham Training Center in Nashville. And we invited all the denominational men's ministries to join us and all the parachurch to join us. And there was some tension at the time because the denominational men's ministries felt a little threatened, and some of the men's ministries were a little too aggressive. And so we were a little nervous, but honestly, man, it was a love fest, and we just bonded, and it was powerful. And what happened is that because we began to know each other, we began to care about each other, stick up for each other, and understanding what each other were doing, we dispersed into all parts of the vineyard instead of all like working in one corner of the vineyard on the same thing. So that was really powerful. And there are basically one or two maybe of those. At one point, churches representing 48% of all the denominations representing 48% of all the churches in America were part of that coalition.
Wow.
But this denominational men's ministries have pretty much been disbanded. So you have that. That's part of the story. That's kind of like the downslope on the story, right? The other side of the story is that so when I got started, Amazon was not there. There were 5,000 Christian bookstores. There are 500 today. An author would write a book and sell 1 million copies. Today, a million authors write a book and sell one copy. So, the changes are so tumultuous, but there were no men's ministry resources to speak of. I mean, there were a few when I got started. And so one of my missions with NCMM, the Coalition of Men's Ministries, was to really promulgate men's literature, Christian men's literature, and all kinds of discipleship products, workbooks, curricula, video, audio, written. And so today we do. There is a plethora. Now I'm not saying I don't mean like it's happened because of me. Here, just a sidebar. Anytime somebody thinks they have a unique message from God, they don't.
That's right.
Whenever God is getting ready to do something, his customary practice is to put that into the hearts and minds of thousands and tens of thousands of his children. So I was just one of many voices speaking like this. But today, anyway, there is an abundance of good resources for men. So then what we started noticing was that leaders had the desire, but not the ability to disciple men. So we shifted our focus at Man in the Mirror, we shifted our focus from reaching men to reaching leaders who are reaching men, pastors and leaders who are reaching men. And by the way, I've spent most of my business career and also most of my ministry career leading leaders, which is a very interesting calling because ultimately you have to be very flexible, very respectful, and you have to understand that you're dealing with people who have new ideas, good ideas, different ideas. And so it's I think probably a special skill set to be able to lead leaders. And so, but anyway, we started doing that, and then these leaders. So how that happened? Just the backdrop. So I was getting invited to come to churches and speak to their men. So we developed some seminars. We recruited a faculty. We had 25 faculty members. We did like 1,300 of these church-based seminars. But just at the very beginning, when I was getting going, I would get to the church. I'd had this great conversation, and I said, but I would get there, and it was like after we'd hung up the phone, they kind of like went, whew, now Pat will take care of everything. So I would get there, and I'm caricaturing this obviously, but it was like nobody had ever really given any consideration. Okay, well, what do we want to have happen at the event? How are we going to measure success? What are we? What kind of men do we want this event to reach? What's the target audience? What do we want to have happen after the event, and many other things like that. And so I'm a model builder. I'm a systems theory guy by training and professionally and so forth. So I came up with this little model. We call it No Man Left Behind. It became a book, but the idea was just really to equip the pastors and leaders in local churches to more effectively disciple their men. Because one of the things that we found, and I really want to encourage you if you're a pastor or a leader listening to this, what we discovered is that almost every church is doing so much more for men than they're even aware of. And so the first thing we do in a consult is we help a church understand all the things they are already doing that's helping men. So maybe on a different podcast on a different day. But anyway, the point of it is that that took off. And so we've helped, thousands of churches all over the world train their leaders. And so we just find that, like you said, pastors and leaders, they're hungry. Any pastor who ever got into the pastoring business, why did he do that?
Right.
Well, he wanted to grow a flock. He wanted to grow them spiritually, but he also wanted to grow them numerically. And so most pastors understand that if they, as it goes with the men, so it goes. Most pastors understand that. So I could keep talking, but let's tie it off there for now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good stuff. All this, and I think we're going to do another podcast on leading our families through some of the tragedies that happened in our nation last week. And my family's still crying. I mean, Molly, my wife, and we cried last night over the Charlie Kirk assassination, and but I wanted to take ownership of that and lead my family through that. And of course, I have the foundation in the heart and the desire that some men don't have. I've even told the church Sunday that I'm thankful. I have twin boys that are 17. Brother Patrick, I know you don't know that, he was a highly influential voice for them, to which they listened to almost every day. And so, part of me, I didn't listen to him a whole lot, but also I told my church, as good as that is, some of the things he shared, I wanted to put it on dads and fathers to be the main instrument of righteousness in the son's life, and to be training their sons to Deuteronomy 6. And I'm not handing that off to a social media guy. That's my responsibility, right? And so as you talk about men's ministry and trying to make impacts on the fathers to be the main disciplers in their home, where would you say, because we do have an effective men's ministry. It's nothing to do with me. It's just that men have caught the fire here, and they're pouring into other men. Again, we see that model in Jesus, right? When Jesus poured into leaders and those leaders poured into men, we see that model before us. We don't have to guess at men's ministry to some degree. But how would you say, maybe somebody out there that dad wants to be that main guy around the table discussing tragedies with his children and how they process that, because children are very perceptive, but they don't really know how to process stuff the way I've seen it. So where would a church start to start reaching those dads, to start building an effective men's ministry? That's a lot. I just said a lot, but hopefully I narrowed it down.
You did say a lot, and you only said one thing wrong, and you said you didn't have anything to do with it. That's the only thing you said wrong. I mean, you had everything to do with it, because people follow leaders.
Maybe some false humility. I don't know.
Well,
Keith and Real Momentum had a lot to do with it. I need to say that he helped us get that. No play on words, or that momentum in our men's ministry.
Yeah. So I grew up in a home, never heard the words "I love you" that I can remember. I never heard the words "I'm proud of you," "We believe in you," "You can do something with your life," "Here's some things you might want to think about for work and or career, or maybe further education." Nothing about God. And so basically, my parents were good people, but they were extremely permissive and extremely passive. And so net, this is why I quit high school. I was in a rage. I was really off the rails. And when I was dating my wife, she said, "I think your parents gave you too much say." Yeah, for sure. And so I was a wild man. And when I married and became a Christian, I became a Christian at follower of Jesus. I discovered Jesus, or Jesus discovered me. Well, Jesus knew me, so maybe I discovered him. Anyway, however you say it, that happened at 24. And when I turned 25, my brother had been off to war, and he was home, and my mom and dad invited us to come out for Thanksgiving dinner. Now, when I left home, I washed my hands of my family, and I saw them, a few times, a couple times a year. But if it wasn't for my wife, I probably wouldn't have seen them at all. But they invited us to come out for Thanksgiving dinner, and the whole family was there. And so we were that family growing up that would say grace over our meals like this: "God is good, God is great, and we thank him for this food, amen." Just wrote as quick as you can, just to get it out of the way. And this particular day, my dad said, "I'd like to pray today." And so we bowed our heads, and he said, "Lord, Mom and I would just like to say thank you." And then he started blubbering. And he got up, he excused himself. He went into the bedroom. I went in after him. I said, Dad, are you all right? What's the matter? And he said, I'm okay. I just need a minute to compose myself. I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, it's just that your mom and I never thought we would ever see our four boys together under the same roof again.
Wow.
And something softened in me that day. And because I was starting to grow as a Christian, I didn't have the words for it, but later I was able to articulate this idea that I just decided to unilaterally forgive my mom and dad for everything. Just put it behind me in the name of Jesus. And now it wasn't, I didn't talk to them about it or anybody else. And so it took another, if that was at 25, it took me till the age of 53 to finally be able to go to a counselor and articulate wounds and things like that and work through all that. But from the age of 35 on, we had a wonderful relationship. I finally did hear my father say, I love you. I wrote a book called From Broken Boy to Mended Man.
Yeah.
So anybody that's listening, you get a copy. If you can't get a copy, send me an email, pat@patrickmorley.com, and I'll figure out how to get you a copy. But yeah, so if you got anger and you say, why do I have such a short fuse? Why do I constantly get angry and then withdraw and pout? Or why do I feel like people don't really care about me personally, or why do I not have a picture of what healthy manhood looks like, which is what you're talking about, Mike. So that's a long way around to get to this idea that as a dad, we have the principal responsibility from Jesus to go and make disciples, but that starts at home. Right? So I when I see a man doing a great job out in the community, I want to know how's he doing at home? Is he balancing that out? So I don't want to see men succeeding in ministry and failing at home. No amount of success in ministry or at work will ever be adequate to compensate for failure at home. That's
yeah.
So anyway, so I grew up with the thing that and I've said this so many times, the thing that I most wanted to do with my life was to be a great dad. So I took the time to figure out what that would look like. And I put that in different books and articles. You could go to my website and just search dad. You'll see all kinds of stuff on there. But there's no substitute for time. There's no substitute for conversation.
Right.
There's no substitute for hugging your children, male and female, and especially when the females are old enough that they're starting to develop as young women. You better keep hugging them, because if you don't, somebody else's son will.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of these things. But men, you're the only one who can take responsibility for
That's right.
your children, and no amount of good parenting guarantees that your children will turn out right. But I will tell you this: bad parenting is pretty much a guarantee that they won't turn out right.
Yeah. You for whatever it's worth, whoever's listening, I've been saying this for years, and the men here have caught on. So many men are saying this. I tell my boys and my daughter, I got two boys and a 12-year-old daughter, that I still lay to bed every single night, still hug and kiss, and that letting them know what real touch is and intimacy really is. But I tell my kids three things. I say, I love you, I'm proud of you, and I'm glad I'm your dad. And I say those three things. And so at one point in and I tell my men to say it, so many men say it to their kids, but at one point we tried a dog. It didn't work out very well. We're not inside animal people. We never have been. So the outside dog just didn't work out. It's too much work, for one. But at one point, I would end that with saying, hey, make sure you take care of the dog, because my boys wanted it, but they didn't want to take care of it, if that makes sense, And so I would ask my boys for a long time, what are the three things I say to you every night? And one of them said, you say, I love you, I'm proud of you. I'm glad God gave you, as a son, and take care of the dog, so they would always add that fourth one on there. So we don't have the dog anymore. So they don't add that. When they said, Dad, you said the three things, but you always added the dog thing. So I had to get that in because you were lazy and not taking care of the thing. So
That's great. Well, that's not without biblical precedent, men. So Jesus, both at the baptism of Jesus and then at the
yep,
transfiguration of
absolutely.
Jesus, what did he say? What did the voice of the Father said?
Yeah.
This is my beloved Son. In other
Yep.
words, I love him, and then in whom
Mm.
I am well pleased. In other words, I'm proud of him. So
Yeah.
God gives us this model, this templar, this example of how we should speak.
Yeah.
If a church wants to start a men's ministry, or just an individual man, it doesn't have to be a church. A guy wants
Yeah.
to start a men's ministry and reach men. What do you think are some of the most important elements to that?
Hmm. Yeah. So I've done a lot of work on this academically as well, and research-based work on it. And then Man in the Mirror. I'm the founder of Man in the Mirror, but I've turned that over now to a new generation of leaders, and just spend my time speaking and writing. And but Man in the Mirror has this No Man Left Behind model that I developed, and then I brought in a couple of guys to co-write a book with me on that. And so I'm going to answer your question, but if somebody is serious, they should go to maninthemirror.org and look at the No Man Left Behind model, and you can get all the information on it there. I think the model is right on the website, and we have area directors that if you're in one of the regions where we have an area director, they consult, come in, and they do that at no charge. So, but I would say vision, determination, and strategy. These are the three most important things. It's just the most important thing is a vision. It really needs to be. It can be a men's leader, but it can't be a men's leader unless the pastor is really on the
Absolutely.
same
Yeah.
side as the vision.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if the senior pastor in the church needs to share or have the vision, something like, we're going to make sure that we disciple every willing man in this church, to, and then whatever else you want to say about it. And then, secondly, is determination, because men's ministry, it is like breaking up concrete. So if you don't have a commitment that I'm going to do whatever it takes, you're going to be in trouble. So, and then the final thing is just having a strategy to do it.
Wes, what I've seen happen, and even you've talked about this, from the very beginning. I think there's some commonality that, to me, as you've began with us today, there was a connection with a group of men, like us. I think what I found, you even mentioned the part about isolation, just being vulnerable and away from help and really away from hope. And I think, if we're not careful, that's still going to play out. And, what we've seen to be the opportunity is that, man, when you get men together, something special really does happen.
Mhm.
It may take time, it may not take time, but over time, the more that brotherhood's built, the more that the engagement's built, the conversations, are carried outside of the room into other opportunities that I think engage the family, can be so impactful. And, I think as you continue to write and speak, I pray God's favor, rest on you, and hopefully there's a double portion of your spirit that many of us can get a hold of, because I think we're still kind of scratching at the surface in most communities in America. Does that man in that city have a chance to be a man of God? Does the little boy that comes to Vacation Bible School have a chance to be a man of God? What is the system or strategy that is not left behind? And I think you've written so well on that, and that's kind of how we build our model at Real Momentum: is create, capture, cultivate. So what we say, we'll create the momentum, capture it with a brotherhood opportunity, and keep leading on the other side to cultivate, for an ongoing life of generational impact. And when it's all said and done, Pat, there's going to be a day that comes when God calls you home. And before that is, I want you to think about, maybe sharing this with us and the listeners there. What do you want to be remembered as a leader, not just as a leader, but as a man?
Um, I remember Billy Graham once saying something like, "I don't want to be remembered," and I think that since nobody really is going to remember you, so wanting to be remembered seems a little bit like a fool's errand. But that said, the thing I really, like I said, the thing I really wanted to do with my life was to be a great dad, and so,
Mm.
and then I decided I wanted to make my wife my top priority after God, but before all others. So I guess I want to be remembered as a family man, somebody who loved his family well and loved Jesus well, and then maybe maybe just somebody who was had the desire to see as many men as possible become followers, discover Jesus, or rediscover him.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard Tony Evans say one time, when you've been dead long enough, people forget about you. So, but on the other side of that, Crawford Loritz said, when a man of God dies, nothing of God dies. So the legacy of your books and your teaching, and people may not remember Patrick Morley once you've been gone long enough, but that legacy and the impact will continue to live on, because nothing in God dies. So I appreciate your legacy in that, brother. I really do.
Yeah, man.
Well,
I think
thank you for that.
I think it's awesome to see, I think it's what God put in you, and He's worked that out of you.
Yeah.
Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. It's God working in you.
I told my wife recently. I said, "Look, I want you to put on my tombstone. It's a shame I had to die. I was just starting to get the hang of it."
That's so true. Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for your time today. Appreciate your
Yeah.
investment, and we'd love to have you back. Hopefully, we can have you back for another podcast, another
We should do
conversation.
that. Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah.
So, well, Keith, Mike, Jason, thank you so much. Justin, thank you so much for having me
Yes.
on today. It's been
Thank
an
you for
honor.
coming on.
Yep.
Thank you for coming on. And I appreciate you men, listeners, for listening to our podcast today. Pray that you'll get connected. Please go to Patrick Morley's website, gets those books and resources. Men need all the help they can get. And that's what we're here for, to help men win, because when men win, everyone wins. So pray that, I don't know, Justin, if you want to say about how to get connected to Real Momentum Ministries. There's so many lessons and articles and events coming up. Anything y'all want to say about that before we close?
Yeah, the easiest way to get connected, stay connected, is you can go on our website, realmomentum.men. If you want to find more stuff on the podcast, you can go to realmomentum.men/RM podcast. And that specifically is for the podcast materials, things like that. But then also, if you could, you can go on our Facebook page, Instagram, X, or Twitter, whatever you want to call that. You can find us on all those social media platforms and like this there. But if you could, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, like us, subscribe to it. And if you've enjoyed what you've gotten, if you don't care to share some kind of a review, rate us there.
Yeah.
That would help us get this out there. It's not about us. It's about the truth that's shared on this podcast. And so if you can get some of that information out there, we want to try to reach and lead as many men as possible as we can. And so that's our heart. That's our desire, to point people to Christ. And so that's just a few ways that you can get a hold of us there.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of resources out there to teach. I would really encourage you, men, if you're starting a ministry and starting some lessons with your men, whatever night of the week you meet, there's so many good resources on the Real Momentum site. I've done the 10 lessons of biblical masculinity with my men. They loved it. I'm doing currently right now shepherding men, winning a relationship with God, and it's been so good. I've seen a lot of fruit from that, a lot of good discussion coming from our table groups on that. So I pray you guys will just be intentional and start somewhere. So, hey, thank you again, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. I pray all you others that are listening that you'll go be the man that God has called you to be, and that you'll take other men with you. Blessings upon your day.